Are you looking to grow revenues, increase profitability, or obtain financing? If so, you came to the right place.
Running a business is all about leadership. How do you become a better leader? Learn from the successful entrepreneurs and business owners how to lead your organization more effectively. That's why we created Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business, to help you succeed with your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro and CFO and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're joined by experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who share their secrets to success via live stream. Also, every Friday morning, we release a new podcast episode. Either way, you will learn about developing your business leadership skills from our roster of highly performing guest experts. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbprou.com.
Good evening and welcome to Leadership Live at 8:05 Talking Small Business. I'm your host, Andrew Frazier, and excited to be here hanging out with you once again. Tonight we got a special show. Usually it's just me one-on-one, but today it's two-on-one, so I got to be twice as good and twice as fast to keep up with these guys. But it's going to be an exciting topic. We're going to be talking about really how to avoid getting sued. You know, when you start a business, the last thing you're thinking about is, I might get sued. But the truth is, you might get sued. So you want to figure out how to avoid that rather than try and figure out how to deal with it after the fact. There's definitely things you can do, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And also about staying out of court. Definitely legal issues can really detract from your experience as a business owner. It's important to work hard to try and focus on your business, try and stay away from things that are going to detract from it. So, I think we're going to cover some things that could be very valuable for you today. And really looking forward to talking to my guests today. We've got two guests, great guests. So first we've got Barry Cohen and also Mitch Beinhacker. And both of them put together their book, 10 Ways to Get Sued by Anyone and Everyone. So that's who we're going to be talking to today. Look forward to your questions, comments, ideas, and let's have a great show. So let me bring them on. Hey, Mitch, how are you doing this evening?
Good, Andrew. How are you?
Great. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Excited.
Okay, great. And hey, Barry, how are you doing? All right. Hey, Barry, can you hear me okay? Or maybe not? All right. Well, a little bit of technical difficulties, but hopefully we'll hear them in a sec. So why don't we start with you, Mitch?
Sure.
You've done a lot of great things on the law. You've been a small business owner for many years, helping entrepreneurs and business owners. If you could take a few minutes and talk a little bit about your journey. How you got to where you are now and what you're doing now.
Sure. I've been practicing law, I guess, 31 years now. So the better part of more than 3 decades. I've been working with small business owners, family-owned businesses, startups, entrepreneurs, founders, things like that, helping them start their businesses, sometimes acquire businesses, and handle all of the transactional work, contracts, operating agreements, buy-sell agreements, partnership agreements, as well as all the transactional stuff that goes on with business. Part of my practice also involves estate planning and tax planning, but often it's for the business owner or for the family-owned business. I also do real estate work, commercial, but often it's also for that clientele. Again, about 31 years. I practice in Union County, New Jersey. So I'm admitted in New Jersey and actually very soon to be New York as well. And nationally, I do federal tax planning, but most of it's New York and New Jersey.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So many years experience as an attorney, but also a business attorney. It's always important to not just have an attorney, but someone who, you know, is an expert in your space, your industry, your type
Right.
of business. So
Exactly.
keep that in mind. Not just accountants, attorneys, anyone you work with. So,
Right.
hey, Barry, can you hear us okay now? It doesn't. Okay. Well,
Back.
we'll figure this out. But before we get started, what we'll do is we'll take a second. Got a short commercial about
Okay.
our Small Business Pro Network, and hopefully we can get Barry to figure out his sound, and we can have him introduce himself when he gets back. So here's a little bit about the Small Business Pro Network. Put together an ecosystem for entrepreneurs and business owners. We invite you to join us, and here's a little bit about what it is. What's the ultimate business ecosystem for helping entrepreneurs to accelerate and grow their businesses? Of course, it's the Small Business Pro Network.
I got to say, I'm glad I trusted you with your plan because and I like the plan. But we are, there's no guarantees, and it is a journey, but we're getting there, and we're making real solid progress.
Andrew helped me with the growth plan for my business and also in the financial side. So we're able to get loans.
I thought it was great, good practical information that is good for both entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs. Andrew breaks it down in a very understandable way.
You need someone that's going to tell you how to get things done, how to move your business forward, how you can run your business like a pro.
I've known Andrew for 10 years, but when we started working together, I got to see the master's mind. And he's been helping me with my financials, making sure everything's together, what's working versus what's not working in my business, so that I'm working on my business and not in my business, period.
Join the Small Business Pro Network to learn from the experts, collaborate with like-minded entrepreneurs, and access valuable resources for growth. Hello, I'm Andrew Frazier. My mission is to help 1 million business owners by 2028 to sell more, make more, and get financing. I've worked with more than 1,000 business owners one-on-one, helping them to grow revenue, increase profit, and obtain financing. I created the Small Business Pro Network to help you achieve your goals faster and easier. Join before Labor Day to become a charter member for free. Visit www.sbpronetwork.com. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Hey. All right, welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05 Talking Small Business. I'm here with Mitch Beinhacker, and let's see if Barry's audio is watching. Hey, Barry, can you hear us okay now? Still working on that. Okay. So what we'll do is, Mitch, why don't we start out with some questions?
Sure.
And hopefully we can get Barry back on. And but while we're starting with you,
Sure.
When I talk to business owners, one of the things that I find is most business owners don't start a business to be a sales and marketing person.
Right.
That's effective what they need to be.
Yeah. Not successful unless you sell.
So, a lot of people come into business not really prepared, or
right.
So, you meet with a lot of business owners. There's probably some things legally that you just see all the time.
All the time.
So what are some of those things that, basic things that as a business owner, you should know about, or you should be thinking about if you have a business?
Okay. So I'll give you a broad, comment about what every business owner should be focusing on, and then we'll talk about more specifics. Does that make sense?
Sounds good.
Okay. So one of the habits that you have to get into, and this is a very common, it sounds simple, but it's a very common problem with business owners. I'll tell you why in a minute, is that you have to start doing things in writing. right? No handshakes when it comes to deals. Don't be working with your partner because you love each other and you think you're brothers and we went to college together and everything will be fine. You have to follow formalities. That means you form a company, whether it's a corporation, an LLC, or something like that. You draft and sign an operating agreement. And you and I can talk about whether you should have an attorney. You obviously should have an attorney to do this, but if you went to Zoom or Rocket Lawyer or anything like these services, which I don't really recommend, but at least you get something. So you want to have an operating agreement that says, hey, this is what I do for the business, this is what you do for the business. And more importantly, what if we disagree? How do we deal with disputes? You mentioned before about we're going to talk about how to stay out of court, but it's not just staying out of court. It's like staying out of trouble, right? Avoiding misunderstandings, avoiding you thinking it meant this and the other person thinking it meant that. So you have to start putting things in writing. That includes, and I'm sure you talk about it in the Small Business Pro University, writing a business plan, a working document that becomes multiple working documents that you use to run your business, to create systems to run the business. I was just talking to a gentleman on my podcast the other day. He's a operations scientist, basically, and he helps businesses put in processes. He's a process scientist to put in processes to run their business. You need those to be in writing. Contracts with customers must be in writing. Vendors, preferably, and be in writing. So when you're doing business, it says what the deal is, what the arrangement is, because our memories don't work like we like them to. Like we're all smart, we're all perfect memories, and everything goes into a file cabinet. You just pull it out whenever you want. Our brains are basically a big box with a lot of sticky notes, and those sticky notes get stuck to all the wrong things. And you and I think that on this night we were out having a drink, and Barry will be like, "No, we were on Andrew's show," and we believe that something happened and it doesn't. So you have to start using those processes to run your business in writing. Okay, and more importantly, that includes documenting things if you have employees. It includes nobody would lease a space, hopefully, and not have a written lease. So all those types of things you have to start doing. And if you do them and you build them into the way you run your business, you will avoid controversy. I'm not saying that you won't disagree with people, but you can at least go back to the writing and say, okay, well, what did we 7 years ago put down and we agreed upon? And that's true with ongoing relationships. So if you are dealing with somebody and there's a change, if you can't do a contract, send them a pretty well-written email just saying, hey, listen, I'm just confirming this and this and this. Please keep this for your records. I will keep it for my records. Not a big fan of texts because you can't really save them and you can't really be as formal with them. But that's the main crux of what you have to do in a lot of business owners. They're so excited. And I mentioned before about not putting things in writing. Well, a lot of entrepreneurs are creative types. I fall into this trap too. And we're just so excited about what we're doing, all the creative stuff and the marketing and the packaging and the this and that, is that we put all the left brain stuff aside because we don't like it. We don't want to deal with the contracts and the boring stuff. But that will keep you on track and in line and out of trouble. Is that a good start?
No, I think that's an excellent start. Definitely really important. Let's see if we got Barry. Barry, can you hear us now?
Yes, can you hear me?
There we go.
All right,
Barry. How you doing?
That's because I switched computers.
There you go.
All right. So you got the modern computer now.
Yes, I do.
Okay, good. So Mitch and I've been chatting a little bit, but wanted to give you a chance to kind of just talk a little bit about your journey, take a few minutes to share who you are, and then we'll get back into conversation on our topic, how to avoid getting sued and stay out of court.
Okay. So I started my career in media and marketing over 40 years ago. Started in radio advertising, transitioned over to the ad agency and PR firm side, and currently have an emphasis working with entrepreneurs and small business owners that want to become thought leaders through publishing. I succeeded in becoming a published author myself some years back, promoted my own books, and people just started coming asking for help. So we've launched a couple dozen books, and I in this case approached Mitch as an attorney and asked him if he would co-author this book with me. And I'll just say this, that the reason we wrote the book is as you alluded to before, Andrew, and that is that the minute you hang out your shingle, there's somebody around every corner looking to sue you for something. So whether it's a dispute or whether it's failure to perform or whatever it is, there's always something. And the book is not a substitute for an attorney. The purpose of the book is so that if you follow the advice in the book, you'll find yourself calling your attorney a lot less.
All right. Okay. And not just a lot less, you'll probably have shorter conversations that will cost you less. So,
Correct.
So that's always nice as well. So, definitely, we're going to chat a little bit about that, but, definitely. And, looking forward to digging in. So, hey, Marcelo, welcome. And so, Barry, you're a non-attorney. What made you want to write this book? And, what are the key things that you wanted to contribute to it to make sure it was valuable for
Sure.
entrepreneurs? And
Well,
business owners?
again, as a non-attorney, but as a small business owner myself, who's dealt with small business owners for all these years, I've seen what happens to people, how they end up on the wrong side of the law unwittingly, without any, bad intentions. And I felt like they needed some kind of a common sense guide to, to keep them on the right side of the law.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. So, definitely, it's important to do that. And Mitch shared a little bit about, the most important thing that you need to be thinking about as a business owner is writing things down, getting things in writing. I always say that, generally people only take in 30% of what they hear. So,
Yeah.
There's always miscommunication if you don't put things in writing.
Right.
Let me just expand on that a little bit, if I may. Um, people rely on their memories. We went as far as to even have a memory expert weigh in on the topic.
Yeah.
Because your memory is not the same as my memory of what happened. So
Yeah.
again, whether it's an agreement between partners, whether it's an agreement with your supplier or your vendor, whether it's an agreement with your customer, it's the same thing. It's got to be in writing. And that's the constant theme throughout the book. Everything in writing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So definitely getting it in writing. I recommend that on the business plan too, because it gives you clarity and make sure you're communicating effectively.
Right. It actually makes you more creative, not less creative, because it frees up your thoughts that are clogging your head. You're trying to remember everything. And like Barry said, you can train your memory to improve things like, meeting people and names and places and dates. But what you can improve is the transactional stuff that goes back and forth, the dealings back and forth. And you have to, do that. And I got to say that with I can say with pretty much confidence that most of the situations I come into that are problems, somebody's got to get out of a lease, somebody has to break up a partnership, whatever, it's due to something's missing. They didn't write a business plan. They don't have a contract, or was very poorly drafted, wasn't drafted by an attorney. And they're arguing about little things, big things. It's just a mess. And like you said before, it's definitely what, nice attorney bills are made of. I mean, you end up spending, you pay me now or pay me later type of thing. And if you work with an attorney early on and you find the right person to work with that you trust, that knows your business, it will cost you less and it will give you much better results. And you can focus on the stuff that you focus on with them, which is building their business and growing their revenue and improving their sales, and not worrying about all the stuff when they put this stuff in place as to how they do business until they can't get someone to pay them. And they're like, well, what do you mean they won't pay my legal fees? Or what? Well, because you don't have a contract that says that, So as the lawyer, I'm always asking that question. Well, let me see the contract first. We don't have a contract. I mean, we have text messages. That's not going to help.
Text definitely not good for documentation.
No, and it's all about read the fine print too. You have an agreement with your vendor or your supplier or your customer. They've got an agreement with you.
Right.
So you got to make sure you're reading and that your agreement isn't incompatible with their agreement.
Right. Sometimes one supersedes the other. And that's a good point that Barry makes. If, as a consumer, we have protections with dealing with things. As a business owner, we're kind of like, caveat emptor, right? You got to read what you sign, read what you agree to, whether it's a warranty or a guarantee or, a contract to do business together. You got to read it. And people, I didn't read that. Well, then why'd you sign it? Certainly can't tell the judge that,
Yeah. So
I was just gonna say, Mitch will corroborate that the judge is not going to be very friendly to the fact that you didn't pay attention to what you said.
Right. Not in a commercial setting. Right. Of course not.
right. And No, I mean that's a great thing. You want to be really careful before you sign anything, and make sure you understand it. Yeah, I've run into it all the time. I help people get financing, and
Yeah, your business is all writing. It has to be. Some industries require it.
right. But a lot of people are in trouble now because one of my clients, he was getting financing when I was just starting to work with him, and he had already started. He was like, "I'm good." I was like, "You sure you want me to look at? I'm good."
Yeah,
Now,
they just want the money and they're going to sign anything. I've
right.
actually had people come to me after the transaction closed and said, "Could you just review this? I want to make sure it's correct." I'm like, "Well, you're going to pay me to review your documents. What if I tell you if it's wrong?" Well, I wouldn't have done it this way. What are you going to do? They go, yeah, nothing. Then
Well,
don't waste your money and pay me to look at something you can't change.
Mitch brings up one of the most important points as well, and that is don't be making the agreements yourself. Have a professional because you don't know what should be included in those agreements oftentimes.
Right. We've all worked with thousands of businesses, and that gives you experience. You do one contract, two contracts, 5 in your lifetime. Trust me, you'll be missing stuff.
So, yeah, I mean, definitely you want to get help with that. I think, the client on the financing, he signed on for floating rate loan, went from 5% to 10%
There you go.
in 3 months. So
Yeah.
doubled his payment.
Right.
And it only would have taken a question, so, I think that's key.
Yeah.
One other thing, I guess, many times, who should really be drawing up the contract? I think, it seems like you would have an advantage if it's your contract.
Well, so that's it. You bring up an interesting point. The courts actually will hold, in some cases, ambiguities in a contract, things that are ambiguous against the drafter. If you don't put language in there that says, hey, my attorney drafted this, but we both had time to review it and bring it to separate counsel. And if anything's ambiguous, don't, by default, hold it against the drafter. Because if you don't have that kind of language, the judge may just say, listen, this is ambiguous. He thought it meant that. It's your contract. So you could have clarified it. I'm going to hold it against you. So, you want to be careful about that kind of stuff and what you do. And, I always tell people they're dealing with something and they're like, well, the other party, I don't even know if he's going to get a lawyer. I said, well, I hope he gets a lawyer because I don't want to deal with him. I'm not going to talk to him if he not represented by counsel. And then if you get into problems later on and he claims this makes up all these stories. Well, I thought it meant that, had no opportunity to get counsel to review it. Now you have a contract that may not be binding. So all that stuff's, very important when it comes to dealings between parties. You want to encourage your partner to get his own lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Can't represent both of them. So
I want to throw something into the mix just for fun that we talk about in the book, and that is for any small business person, their worst nightmare getting sued would be their spouse.
Yeah.
In cases of divorce, you have a really sticky situation, and there are ways to protect against that, and that's something that we go into in some detail.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Even, partnership breaks were like divorces. They're painful. And you really don't want to have to argue about everything. And you just put it aside, move on, and be upset about it and pissed, and you're not talking to each other anymore. At least you have something to go to. The attorneys can look and say, this is what they agreed to. Let's break it up and move on.
Okay.
And the inevitable is that no matter what precautions you take, somewhere along the line, you may still get sued, and you have to know what to do if you do get sued. You do have to have professional counsel on your side. But one of the other things that we talk about is that there are alternative dispute resolutions that you can avoid costly litigation. In many cases, you can either go through mediation or arbitration or possibly even both.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you're in an industry you'd prefer it to be private anyway. You don't want it to be in court. So arbitration's private, mediation, that type of stuff. So, but those have to be the parties can agree to mediate later on or arbitrate, but if they don't, you're stuck going to court. So you want to have a provision in the contract that calls for arbitration, or maybe gives you the right to arbitrate. Maybe it's not, 2 ways. It just depends on how you want to draft it. As long as everybody knows what they're signing, like Barry said.
Okay. So, definitely, you mentioned when you're, if you have partners, it's really important to really work out your partnership agreement. And I would agree with that. I've actually run into problems because of that. It seems like everybody's on the same page, but they might not be. What are best practices as far as that? If you're going to meet a business, business partners who want to go into business.
Yeah.
How should things go? What do you recommend how they should figure those?
Yeah. Well, there are arguments for having an operating agreement it's just you, like for financing purposes or whatever. But if you are doing business with one or more other people, you absolutely have to have a document that controls the operations of the business. If it's a corporation, it's bylaws. If it's an LLC, a limited liability company, it's an operating agreement. If it's a partnership, which you see less of those these days, it's a partnership agreement, but it's an agreement that lays out who the officers of the company are, who the managers of the company are, who can bind the company, who can make certain decisions and do certain things. What do you do when you disagree? What things do you have to agree on, unanimously, and so forth? What if somebody wants to leave? Somebody gets sued outside of the business and they're trying to attach their interest, and what happens with that kind of stuff? Or they want out. They like, listen, I just decided, Andrew, I don't want to do business anymore with you. I'm moving on with my own life. And then what happens with the business equipment, with the accounts, with the social media accounts, with the client lists, those kind of things. It should also include agreement, provisions that talk about, like, okay, what happens to the clients? In law, for example, we have certain ethical rules that if you and I, Andrew, are attorneys and we have a partnership and we break up, we are required, there's no non-competes in law. So we are required to send a letter jointly or separately that says, okay, well, the Beinhacker Fraser law firm is breaking up, and you as the client have a right to choose your own attorney. You could choose to go with Andrew, you could choose to go with Mitch, or you can choose a third attorney, and here are forms to do that. And please, you can make your decision. So that happens to be in law. It may be in other professions that I'm not aware of. But you have to address all those issues ahead of time when you're getting along, sooner than later. Some people, they start doing things. Maybe it is a business, maybe it's not a business. Then it starts going, like you said. Now they're going to your programs and they're growing. They have to start putting those things in place as early as possible when they all know and are on the same page. So that's what I got to say about that.
Okay, great. That's all you got to say about that?
At this point.
That sounds like the Forrest Gump statement.
It does. Let me throw something into the mix here as the non-attorney. When we started AdLab, I had a couple of partners. In addition to having the operating agreement in place day one, we actually came up with a compensation plan and appended that to the operating agreement and had everybody sign off on it. So day one, there was no question about who was going to get paid, how much, and how.
Yeah, it's all important. It's all important.
And it's amazing how much easier it is to do that up front. I work with a lot of business owners, now that they're fighting, it's almost ruining the business.
Yeah,
because
crazy.
Everybody always feels they work the hardest and the most hours, and they're contributing the most to the business.
Yeah, and I've had situations where, I don't know, two siblings, let's say, took over a business from the parent. And over the years, the one sibling rose and became the president, and the other sibling, who owned 50% of the business and got 50% of the profits, didn't really do much anymore. And the president of the company now wanted to make some changes. Why should I be getting 50%? Well, we need to change this. I go, how? Okay, but your brother, sister, whatever, doesn't have to agree to that, because you didn't address it up front. You don't have it in writing. So, all those issues become problematic as you start to, grow the business, develop the business, and it's never 50-50 in terms of effort. So if somebody doesn't want to put effort in, that's fine, but they should, be penalized for doing that. So,
right. Well, and also, I like to look at it, when I'm dealing with those is, there's employment and ownership.
Yeah.
And they're both two different things.
Very much so.
So can you talk a little bit about that, how employment and ownership is different, and some of the things that you could or may want to do as a result of that to resolve some of those types of issues?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Barry wants to make some comments, but yeah. So when it comes to the ownership of the business, you got to remember that if you are, operating the business and you're working in the business all the time, and you never have time to be an owner and work on the profitability of the company, you really might just be an employee of a company you also own, right? But when you're an employee, employees tend to get salary and they go home at night and they don't think about it 24 hours a day. When you're owning the business, you do think about it 24 hours a day. So you want to structure things. So, maybe, for example, if you have a partner and it's not even necessarily just for the nature of the business, maybe you're bringing in more sales than the other person's bringing in. You might have maybe a base salary for the two of you, which is as an employee working for the company. And then profits may be split differently. Maybe you track sales and you split it up based on the percentage of sales that are closed for you and for him or her to make it more equitable. Equitable doesn't always mean equal, right? It just means more fair. So that's how I usually address those things. Sometimes, you do some deferred items. Sometimes you do it currently. But I think a lot of people who are less inclined to focus on the details think that, oh, well, if I go into business with Andrew, we're 50-50 partners, so we share everything 50-50. It doesn't have to be that way. Voting can be different from profitability, which can be different from ownership. You can really break it up almost any way you want to. So all that stuff becomes very important, and you can pretty much, design it the way you want to. If you go to me as the lawyer and you say, listen, this is what we want to do, these are our concerns, I can draft it up and I can structure it so it'll work for you guys in a structure that makes sense going forward, depending on, the industry that you're in.
Okay. So no, I mean, that makes sense. Definitely. If you're doing that for people, I'm sure you also recommend they get their own attorneys as well.
They should, yeah.
So that's key. So, Barry, you've seen a lot of businesses. You've had your own, and I think when you're looking at it from a business owner, what would you say the first thing that you should be thinking about as ways to protect yourself going into your business?
Well, again, the main thing is making sure that you have all your agreements spelled out upfront in writing, as we said before. And that means your agreements with your partners. It means your agreements with your employees. It means your agreements with your suppliers, with your customers, with your vendors, everybody. Day one, you don't want to be doing any of this after the fact later. That's really first and foremost. As I mentioned before, on that whole issue of that you just described about splitting, employment versus ownership. That's exactly what we did. Day one, our compensation plan spelled out, because I didn't want anybody riding my coattails, in all honesty.
Right. Yeah. And Andrew, just to chime in on that, I call it governance. When it comes to running your business, the proper governance documents. I mean, I've had business owners where they're selling to their partner or they're selling to another person who's an employee in the business. They don't even have a corporate binder, certificates. They're like, I don't know, I guess our CPA has that. No clue. So there's none of that stuff. You need to have bylaws. You need to, if you make decisions, especially if they're bigger decisions. So Barry makes a decision with his partner to change their compensation arrangement. They put corporate minutes in their binder, or they draft and sign a resolution that goes with their operating agreement to, what's the word? To
memorialize.
Memorialize. Thank you. Very good word. Memorialize what the discussion was that day at that time for our, for our annual shareholder meeting or monthly, planning meeting or whatever it is. And yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many situations where I come into where they're selling or they're looking to sell, or they got a partner who's younger and then they're getting older and they have none of this stuff. I mean, I guess they're lucky that it worked out that they got to where they were. But
well, Mitch can confirm this. When it comes to any agreement, the bottom line is what was the intent of the parties.
Right.
And that's what's got to be spelled out.
Right, because you know what? In your mind, it'll change because you'll think it was one thing and maybe it really was, and you don't remember it. You mean well. Let's assume that everybody means well. they just don't remember things. So you have to start making those, when I get involved with companies like that, that's one of the first things I'm doing is cleaning up their minutes book. They have certain programs they never formally adopted. They have to really follow those things because, everybody's not, it's a small business, not IBM, right? It's not Microsoft. What are you following all these formalities? It's not public stock, which is true. But at the end of the day, that's all that represents your ownership of the business. And it can devastate your relationships, your life, financially really be hurtful to you if you don't take these steps to just set it up. And once you get good at it, and you understand what you're doing, it's easy to have an attorney do it for you. And some of it you can do yourself once you're set up. It's the aftermath. And also there's, you can't expect a lawyer to come back and create documents that go backwards if something's going on, like a lawsuit or something like that. That's fraud. So, nobody's going to do that. So you got to have that stuff in place, like Barry said from the beginning. And it doesn't have to be so detailed. Maybe you're just getting started, right? You don't know what the business is going to look like, how well you're going to do. So you develop that over time. You revisit it every 6 months, every year, whatever.
You can't 100% bulletproof your business entirely.
Right.
But if you're taking these steps from the beginning, you're in better shape. And one of the things to also be concerned with, we talk about this in the book too, is insurance. There are certain types of insurance that every business should have. You should definitely have liability insurance. You should probably have cyber liability insurance in today's world. You should have employment practices liability insurance.
Employees,
and if you have a larger company, you should be looking at directors and officers insurance as well.
Right.
Definitely errors and omissions if you're a professional firm.
Right. I was just talking to a company that was considering potentially liquidating. And they said, well, what do we do about our product warranties? I said, well, first of all, you talk to your insurance carrier and find out what they're going to cover going forward and so forth. Maybe you need a tail or something like that. And then, you decide. A lot of it's communication and being open and transparent to your customers and what you're doing when it comes to business. But yeah, a lot of it comes down to, because when it comes to insurance, like Barry said, you're really just buying a lawyer, right, to defend you if something goes wrong. So you want to make sure that they will defend you and they will cover you if you have a loss. And that all that stuff's very important. A lot of people don't know what they're covered for until there's a problem, a theft, a fire, a lawsuit, harassment, things like that. And they're like, well, what do you mean we don't have cyber insurance? Wasn't that included in our liability policy? A lot of business owner policies now include cyber insurance, but they're very, very mild, minimal coverage. Having a standalone policy usually makes sense these days.
Right.
If you're doing
if you're not engaging in the right practices, the insurance company is not going to.
Yeah, they have rules that say, hey, we'll cover you if you do this. If you have an annual employee meeting and show us that you're communicating with your employees and make an attempt to mitigate things. And if you do things to teach your employees not to, click on things that they get, as phishing emails and stuff. And if you're not teaching them, they're like, why are we covering that?
As much as we're talking about lawsuits, the other thing you have to keep in mind is regulatory. We're in a society with a lot of, regulations at all levels, from federal to state to county to municipal.
Yeah.
And you've got to be on the right side of those laws as well.
Right. And it's not just like OSHA. It could be like signage, and then the next thing you know, your client calls you up and says, I just got a municipal violation from my town for our sign that's too big. I said, well, did you look at the signage regulation? I didn't know there were such a thing, that type of stuff. You need a lot of approvals from towns to operate. You need licenses in certain industries. Certainly got to follow the federal and Department of Labor rules in your state. All that stuff becomes very important. And you don't get a pass, like Barry was saying before, because, you didn't know. It's commercial. You're a business owner.
We were leasing office space and then found out that even though we didn't own the building, that the fire marshal had to do an inspection and that we had to comply with certain regulations.
Yeah, no. I had a for-profit school that was renting from a nonprofit church. So for anybody listening, if you're a non-for-profit, you own real estate, you don't pay tax. You don't pay property taxes. The churches don't pay property taxes. Well, they do if they sublet to a for-profit. So the tax collector found out about it. This has been going on for years, right? Tax collector found out about it. He liked the church, so he decided to impose a fine on the school. Wasn't even the property owner. And it got very messy. Very messy.
Okay.
So, and they hadn't paid property taxes because they didn't think they had to. The church didn't think they had to. Years of going back. So now he had to negotiate and deal with the thing. Another one is labor. Barry's mentioned the labor laws. Everyone wants their people to be 1099s these days, right? Because then you don't have to have a payroll, and it's much more flexible. It also doesn't give the employee the rights that the state wants them to have. So there are very, very strict bright line tests that make most people employees, W-2 employees, and other people not, the group of 1099 is much smaller than you want it to be. And I've had clients get fines from the DOL of thousands of dollars because they have all these 1099 people and they recategorize them. You got
we call it misclassification.
Yeah, misclassification. You got record violations. You got, frequency of pay, all kinds of stuff, and it adds up. A couple thousand employee, you got 50, 75. Next thing you know, you got a $75,000, $80,000 fine, and guess who's trying to negotiate it so you don't go out of business. So, and that gets expensive too. So, and you're required to know those rules.
Yeah. And, one thing I always say is, as a business owner, there's so many things you need to know that you can't possibly know them all. So,
yeah, exactly. Well, I hope this conversation doesn't make people think like, well, maybe they shouldn't go into business. I don't know. It sounds too complicated, but it's not. If you get the right advice, and people work with you and people work with me, and a good CPA and all those types of things you got to get on your team. And then you can make a good go of it.
Yeah. But, the other thing I always tell people is, at the end of the day, you got to own your business. So you got to own every decision. If I'm coaching you, that doesn't mean you have to do everything I tell you. If you have an attorney, that doesn't mean you need to do everything they tell you, because usually they're a little more conservative than you should be.
Right.
Your accountant's going to be probably more conservative than you should be.
Yeah, you want to take risks, you do it on your own. The professionals won't do it for you.
Right. But sometimes you need to do that to stay in business and make money.
100%.
Because if you don't take any risk, you don't get any return.
Yeah, so, and a good lawyer and even a good CPA should preface what he or she says and say, listen, here's the right way to do it. Here's a way to do it where it's less costly because you're just getting started. And here's the risks of not doing it the right way. And then you can make the decision as long as you're educated.
Well, here's another point to consider. And that is, as a business person, you have to look at everything in terms of risk and reward. And you really have to determine, take the emotion out of it. You got to decide, hey, is it really worth going and suing this person? Because what do I stand to gain? How much am I going to tie myself up? What is it going to cost me in the long run? Is it worth it? No.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like business planning. The more work you do up front, the less headaches and issues you're going to have, and the more successful you're going to be. So that's cool. So now, what other things do you have, in the book, or what other key important things come up with small business owners that usually they're not aware of, or get blindsided by?
I'm trying to think what other things we covered. We covered employment. We talked about that. I find that, and this kind of falls in the world that you work with, that, people don't manage their finances too well when it comes to, debt, keeping we did a chapter on basically credit, and paying your bills on time, not neglecting things. Sometimes people are, so overwhelmed that they're not paying the bills on time. They're just dealing with it. And cash flow management is important, especially when you go and you do need an actual business loan. And then they go, well, you're always 60 days late paying my bills. Yeah, but I always pay it, and I pay the late fees. The system doesn't work that way, unfortunately. And you may want to, get a D&B number and start to build business credit and so forth. Because I find that, that's always something where, you as a professional can look at them. Are you bankable or not? So a lot of that has to do with your propensity to pay and pay on time and things like that to build your credit. Another one I like, or like is a bad word, I run into as a problem that people don't do, but I think is very important, is non-competes, non-solicitation agreements, non-disclosure agreements, even with small business owners. So, in some states and even in New Jersey, sometimes it's difficult to enforce a non-compete. This courts don't like people to not be able to work for a living, right? But they do enforce things like non-solicitation agreements, so you don't steal all your employees and steal all your customers. They do enforce non-disclosure agreements if you learn secrets and, trade secrets that you have and the processes you use. So you don't use it to then go out and start a new business. But I've had small business owners that brought people on. They didn't sign anything. And next thing you know, the person had a fight with somebody and they're out down the street starting a new company. And there's not much you can do about it if you don't have it in writing, signed and reviewed and agreed to. So, even as small as a barber shop or a nail salon or whatever, and those are services that can be reproduced pretty easily. The last thing you want you to do, and barbershop's a good example, right? So if you tend to stay with your barber if they don't move too far away. So if the person switches and goes 5 miles down the road to the other barbershop, you're probably going to go with them. So you want to have certain restrictions on that. And it can't be forever, but it can be a couple of years, give you a head start when the person leaves. Or if they want to go farther away, they go farther away and build a clientele, that way. And I've had to negotiate and settle things. And I've also had people back off because we had the right agreements in place when it came to this stuff. But
another area that, we do touch on is intellectual property. If you create something of value, it should be copyrighted, trademarked, what have you. It's just too important not to protect it, and it's worth spending the money to make sure that it is protected, because it's part of the valuation of your business when you go to sell the business.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Even if I have a company that's got some products and their patents have expired, but you can't really renew or whatever, but they still have a name. So if at the end of the day, somebody kind of knocked off their product, they could do that, but they can't use their name. So it gives them a little bit more protection because they do own the trademarks in those cases. And, there's some very good intellectual property attorneys out there, and you shouldn't do it on your own. But if you are doing some research, figuring some things out, the USPTO website, uspto.org, .gov actually, is very user-friendly. It's very consumer-oriented. It's very easy to navigate. You can do searches. You can figure things out. And at the end of the day, you go to a lawyer to get it filed and whatever.
Yeah, definitely I've been on there. It's great info. And even if you don't do it yourself, knowing that will save a lot of time with your attorney because you can come in prepared.
Right.
And, a lot of basic questions will be answered. And, but yeah, definitely knowing as much as you can about everything yourself, and then ensuring that other people who have more expertise are seeing it the same way. Is key.
Right, but intellectual properties are a sticky area as well, because you can't go and retroactively file. If somebody is going out and and is already using. You can file for, again, Mitch can corroborate this, but you can file for an intent to use, but if you forgot to do it, and somebody else comes along and starts using the trademark or whatever sooner, you're going to be in a lot of trouble trying to, get that back after the fact.
Right. Yeah. You can file, you can file the mark retroactively if you can prove you were using it. But if somebody else has been using it, you can't stop them from using it. So becomes a problem. What I tell business owners is if you're starting a business, you're thinking of a name, you should kind of do it backwards, right? You should make sure, find a domain that's available, do a Google search. Don't just do it. I've had people do a trademark search and it's available on trademark, and then they find out there's a website out there that's using the name and never trademarked the name. So you kind of want to do both. And then you go and form your company when you know that all the lights are green. I always say you don't need to wait till all the lights are green to head to town. Yeah, those you kind of want to make sure they're all green, right? You can trademark it. You have a good website that corresponds with the business. You don't have to do some crazy, name, and that it's also not some website out somewhere.
Right. Let's look at the flip side of that, though, and that is you don't want to be infringing on anyone else.
Right.
Exactly. You can't just swipe a photo that you like, right, of something you found somewhere and put it on your website.
Right.
It's really important to make sure that anything you put on your site is something that you either own the rights to or have secured rights to. Another area that's really sticky is when it comes to music. Music is a whole different animal entirely. You have the right of composition, right? You have the right of performance, the right of recording, and now today, the digital millennium copyright law. So, it gets very complicated. You do not want to be using somebody's music in your YouTube video.
Right. And listen, that gets back to contracts, right? You want to make sure whoever's designing your website, whoever's providing you with music, whoever's providing you with photographs, that you have in writing that says that they acknowledge that this stuff is, free domain or it's owned by them or whatever, and you have the right to use it. Because when you get a letter from Getty Images or one of these law firms that troll around looking for people that violated their copyrights, and you get letters, thousands of dollars, and now we're negotiating, trying to make it go away because there was one or two photographs on your website that you didn't realize pulled from somewhere else by some web designer. If you have it in writing, then you put it off on the web designer and say, hey, you deal with this. You're supposed to indemnify me because you represented that the pictures were all usable. So all that stuff's very important.
Not to mention that you have to have an agreement that the site is a work for hire.
Yeah, that you own the work. Also, by the way, any of these sites where you go, what are they called, Barry? Like a Can Photoshop and all these places where you can buy photos to use on your brochures and your website. They have restrictions too. You got to read what the limitations are. What the licensing agreement says. You may have a limited number of impressions that can be used on a website or on a brochure. So if you print 1,000 brochures, you might have to pay another fee, things like that. So you want, and it's there. You just got to find it on the website. And you got to read it. Don't just assume that because you're paying a fee that you can use it unlimited anywhere, put it on the Goodyear blimp. It doesn't matter. It's not true.
Okay. So now question, like the $1 million question is, all this stuff sounds really expensive and hard.
Yeah.
So, if you're starting a business, how much money do you need to put in that budget? And if you don't have that much money, does that mean you shouldn't start your business? Because I run into business owners every day. They have a certain amount of money that they're working with.
Yeah. So I always say, let's put the I don't have any money aside for the moment, right? So I always tell people that if they're just getting started, probably $3,000 to $5,000 should be a budget for legal, right? That'd be enough to form the entity, to get an operating agreement or bylaws, corporate kit, so forth. Maybe put together a basic contract for customers within the $4,000 to $5,000 range. So maybe it's
one caveat to add to that. Depends on where you live, because
I'm talking about
in the New York metropolitan area. You're right. Your fees are much higher. If you're in Tennessee,
it's zero. If you're in a large metropolitan area to that, maybe it's more like $30,000 to get started. But if you're in New Jersey, you're working with me. I work with small business owners here. That's probably what we're looking at. And could you get away with it less? Because in another state they might not charge. My minimum fee to look at a contract is $1,500. I really don't want to get out of bed for anything less than that. So, and at the end of the day, it's always a 3 to 5 hour, time slot to put something together like that. So if you take $1,500 there and you take $2,500 to $3,500 for an operating agreement, depending on the parts that you need, there you are. There's $5,000. And then now, if you're just getting started and it's just you can form the company. Right, the filing fee is like $130, and if you used me, at least it would be $500 to start the company, form the LLC. Okay, don't necessarily need an operating agreement if it's just you, unless Andrew, you're getting the financing, and the financing company wants an operating agreement. That kind of stuff. But you can get away with it.
Right. But today you could have a one-person LLC. In the past, you could
years
not.
ago you used to have two. Yeah, and you put your spouse on it.
Right.
But you don't have.
It's worth doing it because it's it affords you some measure of protection.
Very much so. And if you follow formalities and a little bit beyond the scope of this, and sometimes choosing whether you have an LLC or a corporation, sometimes that's a CPA, an accounting discussion. But either way, so that's probably the budget you're looking at. But that's how you get by. I mean, if you really, the funny thing is, if you went to one of the websites, right, LegalZoom or whatever, they're really not going to save a lot of money over forming the LLC with me. And usually they miss steps, or, you do something wrong, or you don't know what you're doing. So maybe you save $150. They charge you $300 plus the phone. I don't know. But that's probably as cheap as you can go. I wouldn't recommend you operate as a sole proprietor. It's too much liability. So, that's kind of what you're looking at, how you can get started. And then as you grow and you have a partner, then you add the operating agreement, and, then you do a client agreement. But at the end of the day, some of this stuff, Andrew, is unavoidable. You can't just do business with 100 people and then start using a contract. you got to have a contract that sets the rules and, you know, what's going to happen under these different scenarios. Because you will have problems, no question about it.
So, yeah, no, definitely, you know, you want to have your stuff in order as much as possible. So,
Day one.
So,
yeah, pretty much.
So, you know, as always, you know, time goes really fast on the live stream, even though it's an hour, you know,
Right.
an hour can go by really fast. And, you know, with two guests, it goes by twice as fast. So, but we still did cover a whole bunch of stuff. And, you know, it's always great to be able to share some, you know, valuable knowledge. You know, one of the things I usually ask guests to do is, you know, just like you said earlier, nobody remembers everything. So maybe think of the top 3 things that people should take away from what we talked about today and that they can start implementing tomorrow. So think about it for a sec. I'm going to play a quick commercial and then we'll come back and get your top 3. And then maybe we'll get top 3 from the attorney and the top 3 from a business owner perspective. So what I'm going to do is take a second. Any of you guys in the Jersey area, you probably heard about the Power Breakfast events that I do every so often. Our next one's actually going to be October 27th. So definitely hope you can join us. If you don't know what it is, here's a quick video about it, and then we'll be back talking small business. If you are looking to increase revenues, improve profitability, and or obtain financing for your business, you need to check out the Power Breakfast and Small Business Pro conferences.
My name is Andrew Frazier. One of the things we're here to do is supercharge your day.
Today's Power Breakfast has really been a phenomenal experience. I think it's exactly what business owners need, some true guidance of people who are genuine and really are leading them in the true direction of business growth and expansion.
The Power Breakfast is so important for the entrepreneurial community because it gives the various business people who come together an opportunity to interact and also do some business.
These events, hosted by Andrew Frazier, President and COO of Small Business Like a Pro, will supercharge your day.
Hi, I'm here with Mitch and Barry talking small business. We had a great chat about, you know, a lot of the key things that you should be thinking about as a business owner from a legal perspective to avoid getting sued and stay out of court. So, Mitch, why don't we start with you? What 3 key things should people be taking away from?
Well, you want to go back and forth so I don't steal them all from Barry, and then I'll give you one.
I'll make it easy. Get in writing, get it in writing, and get it in writing. There's 3.
There you go. There you go. And on top of that, I would say don't write agreements yourself. Because it's always missing things on the other side. Like what happens if things go wrong? Always, always, always write a business plan. And it doesn't have to be, right? It could be a lean canvas plan, 1 page. It doesn't have to be graphs and charts and, you know, something out of an MBA school, which I'm sure you wrote when you were in school. And the third thing would be the thing I talked about, non-solicits. You know, if you have people working for you, have them sign agreements to acknowledge that they will not steal your customers and your employees, at least that they won't steal those things. So those are my 3.
Okay. So
keep it in writing, put it in writing, put it in writing.
Okay. So definitely the writing's key. You know, but put it in writing and don't write it yourself is the other piece.
Yeah, because I have things in writing that don't work. You know, they're missing. Right. It's not even worth the paper it's written on. So
right. But you know, one thing that I've found, and you probably appreciate, is if someone puts it in writing and gives it to you to finalize, as opposed to asking you to write.
They could do that. It doesn't save them any money, but at least it gives me an idea of what they're thinking. That's usually what I want to know, how they run their business and what they want into the agreement. Then I'll put a basic agreement together. I'll even ask them, listen, do you ever have agreements from somebody you worked for in the business? Now you're starting your own business. Let's see what they had to, you know, because it may be, you know, something in the pet industry and I'm not as familiar with it. And then we'll pick and choose and put together a good agreement for you. But when you don't write these things on a regular basis, there's a lot of basic stuff that you don't know you should include.
Mm-hmm.
Here, non-disparagement agreements, right? So if you break up, you don't want your friend going out on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and saying all kinds of bad things about you.
Yep.
Happens all. I had a case once where the guy literally called me. I sent him the settlement agreement. It's a big, complicated thing. And he calls me back, leaves me this message. I was reading the agreement, and you mean I can't say anything bad about these people after this is all settled? I'm like, no, that's what a settlement agreement is about. No, you cannot say bad things about the other people, and they can't say bad things about you. Oh, he was so upset.
So, okay. So, I think we just scratched the surface. But, as a business owner, not all of these things I knew before I went into business. So, it's important to just get this type of perspective. And expertise, because, in business, what you don't know can still hurt you. So, and that's what this protects you from. So, guys, I appreciate you joining me tonight. Always a pleasure hanging out with you guys, and hang out for a minute as I close out, and we'll chat in a bit. So, all right, thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. Definitely it was great chatting with Mitch and Barry. They shared some valuable knowledge and their expertise, and hopefully that benefits you. Please feel free to share this with anyone else you think that would benefit from it as well. As at the end of the day, it's important that the more you know, the faster and more successfully you're going to grow. And this can help you to be able to do that, and also help you avoid getting derailed. So each week, as you know, we have a great guest. Next week, what we have is Sean Deverson. We're going to be talking about posturing for prosperity in a complex world. Definitely the business environment, and just, everything's global, everything's technology's changing. It becomes a, very complex very quickly for business owners. So, how do you posture yourself? How do you position yourself for success, despite the complexity out there? So looking forward to having that chat, and looking forward to seeing you guys next week. As you know, now that Labor Day is over, we got the mad dash till the end of the year. So I hope you got your running shoes on, and we're looking forward to having a great year in 2023. You still got time to meet and exceed your goals, and hopefully we can help you do that. Thanks again, and see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.